just was phenomenal. And the music itself, I love that opening song.
Oh, yeah, me too. You have made me glad from Psalm 92.
Yeah, that was just...
This is great.
And then the Brooklyn Tab song that y'all did.
With the crown or the grace greater than our sin or whatever which one it was.
Yeah, it's so good.
We got that was a Cliff Duran arrangement. Cliff, who's become a friend recently, did those hymn arrangements.
Beautiful.
Well, this has been great. Thank you guys for tuning in today just to hear Pastor talk to me about how great I am. I mean the red light's on. I don't know. They just left us in here. We don't have a producer. We don't have anything. So now it's finally time for us to have a real pot. We're going to have a real sit-down.
Let's talk about everybody else.
No.
They're usually all in here, so we can't talk about it. So let's just start. Jared got married this weekend.
So he did. He got married
last
yesterday.
night. And do you think he'd show up to work today?
No. I cannot
believe it didn't come.
I thought, Jared, we thought we knew where your allegiances
I
lied.
thought you had a work ethic that was beyond all that.
But we'll see. We'll
got married,
see about that when we get
and
to
you gone.
You know, in all seriousness, though, so I got to be there for the wedding. So I'll say two things. Joke first. So I'm playing there with Luke Baxley. I'm playing the piano, and he's standing next to me playing the violin. And I look out, and I'm playing. I look out at the congregation as we're playing. Not a single person even knew there was a piano. Every single person, like, look at the violin. You see the violin?
Well, he's pretty phenomenal.
He is excellent.
He really does have a gift.
But the non-joking thing, and he's going to Belmont, so hopefully they don't ruin him. You know?
Really.
We've done our best with him. Taught him everything he knows.
We'll go up there and whoop the fire out of it.
That's what I'm talking about. You know, I tell you, if I went up to Belmont, I graduated from Belmont, but if I went up there now, I don't think I would have any idea where I was. They send me this thing in the mail. They said, Belmont, your education partner for life, blah, 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 give us money. But anyway, they sent me this picture of the campus. And I showed it to my wife. I said, honey, I have no idea what this is. Yeah. They've knocked down every building that I was in at the time.
And rebuilt. Well, that's why it costs.
I know.
What it does to go
Please help us. Our endowment has shrunk to only $1.1 billion.
Yeah,
Please, can you just spare some loose change?
That's all they have to get by on. Good night, nurse.
Just pray for them, I guess. I don't know what their endowment actually is, but I'm sure it's... Anyway, so the thing from Jared's wedding yesterday that's not a joke, man, I tell you, it's so good to go to a Christ-centered wedding.
Yeah.
When they're just like, this is a worship service, and when we're uniting these hearts, just as marriage is a mystery that points to Christ in the church, and from start to finish, that's what it was. And
good.
So Jared and Sarah, they're going to their honeymoon down there in Florida, and then he'll be back.
Do you have the exact address?
I wish I did.
I wish we did, too.
Oh, I wish I did. That would be too funny.
Man.
Yeah, they're going to Nassau.
Nassau? Oh, okay. So Jared, if you're watching, we'll be there.
We'll see you.
Lickety
we can get a flight out of Miami.
Pastor and I are going to put on our denim jackets, which is our vintage beach wear, and we're heading on down just to enjoy some time with y'all.
Pastor knows people in Florida.
Pastor, I've heard that you know a person
We
or two
do.
down
We can
there
get a
in
flight
Florida.
out of Florida easy to Nassau. Nothing to it.
No problem. No problem.
No problem. Great service today. As we were talking, I don't know if y'all heard it, but the worship today was just phenomenal. Then we had two people baptized. You baptized one, and
yes,
we had a deacon baptize another. And it's just great crowds, great worship service. I'm so impressed with all those graduates.
I tell you, man,
they are just sharp-looking group. We got everything from...
There's so many people doing aerospace engineering.
DNA engineering to space engineering. We got rocket scientists.
Lily's going into the film industry. People somebody's on the cheerleading squad for UNA, and that was Kirby Lane, right? Cheerleading squad at UNA, and she's studying to be a nurse. That's pretty cool.
And Chloe, I called on Chloe because she went to classical school, so she took Latin. Mm-hmm. So
Latin
great day. Great.
It was
a really good day.
It really has been good. It's just one of those days you just get done with it. There's just so much great energy. Mm-hmm. And you were preaching the lights out. Of course, you started kind of lecture style, but then you preached the lights out. We'll get to that in a second. There was something else I was going to say about today, but I can't remember. And I probably shouldn't hang around to try to remember it because we got to finish up this podcast because I'm going to the D group leaders meeting. They're having Barry's leading that. That's going to be cool. They're starting the D groups in the fall. So we're recording this Sunday afternoon. The service is over, which Pat, this is the last little bit of energy, Pastor. We just light up like a Christmas tree. We're so excited, and then about 15 minutes from now, we're both going to crash, take a nap for like 2 hours, something.
Yeah. No, I've got to
something
go
like
to the
that.
hospital.
I know you're driving
in
to
Atlanta to the hospital. That dear friends in the ministry who were in horrible wreck Friday night, and we're headed over there to see them.
Yes, sir.
Husband and wife.
And we're going to pray for them. But that's a surprise. That's not the reason we're doing this today. You want to tell people about what you're traveling to do this week? Are you just going? Are you actually taking some time off this week?
A little bit.
You're not going to preach.
I'll be back. No, because you're going to preach Sunday. That's why I'm doing it. You're preaching Sunday.
I guess I better
rarely get a
on
week where I'm not preaching, so I've got some time that I've got some book. Listen, sweet man was in World War II, Captain
Yes.
Ray, I call him Captain, brought me a book, found it on my desk today on the Battle of Agincourt.
Oh, neat.
So I'm taking that to read. I've got several books I want to read this week.
Well, I'm glad you're actually going to take it. So Miss Debbie's not going to let you go and preach
No,
anywhere.
and I'm coming back. I'm
whatever.
coming back Friday. I'll be here through the weekend, into next week. I'll drive back up there and get her and bring her home.
So I graduated from seminary a couple of weeks ago. Wow. And I got my Master of Divinity of Southern Baptist Theological. They call it the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary
I know.
in Louisville, Kentucky. And so Pastor heard about that, and he said, "Well, if you think you're all that in a bag of chips, you're going to have to preach." Told me that like 4 weeks ago. So next weekend.
It's really to finish up your class.
That's true. It is part of that.
Although they've given you the diploma. Have you gotten it yet?
No, it's not in hand. I don't know when it's going to come in, but hopefully sometime this week.
Well, hey, I just tell them, forget this.
I know. Right?
I've already got my diploma.
Well, as soon as I'm walking out next week, I'm hanging that sucker right on the front of the pulpit.
Do it.
Just be like, you guys can agree or disagree with what I'm about to say, but
You put all of the time, the energy, and the money in those things, and you just hang them in a place where nobody ever looks at them.
Nobody cares. That's the thing. It's like when they ask you your GPA. Who looks at your GPA? And actually, hopefully, no one will look at my GPA. I'm just kidding. No, look, praise the Lord.
We've had so many preachers that have lied about their degrees that we have to go and look at them.
That's right. People, all the preachers.
Well, we're laughing at it. It's really sad. Oh yeah, I've got a PhD from somewhere. Well, no, you don't.
It's an honorary degree.
We call. You don't even have an honorary anything. You just ain't got a degree
honor.
And you've lied about it.
There is no honor. That's like the guys that what was the thing a couple of years ago when they were getting other people to do their research and write their messages for them?
Yeah.
Barry McCarty kept talking about that.
Well, he did that. He came here to preach for me.
Yeah.
And he left the address. I won't mention the company. There's a company that you can pay. It's like $40,000 a year. $40,000 a year. And he put the address of it right there on my computer.
He showed me that when he did that. He's like, make sure that Mac sees this. And he wrote that out.
I've just got it there. He is a hoot.
Do you still have your award, the Kate Tarabian
I've got it sitting on my, it's up there next on the wall. I sure do.
Well, one thing, we shouldn't talk about this today because it's too long of a conversation, but at some point we got to talk about the whole AI writing your sermons. Have you seen this yet?
Where do you do that? Where do you get that from? Do you just get on the computer and find AI?
Yeah, well, there's a few different online applications. The most popular one or famous one is ChatGPT. And you get on there and you can say, hey, write me a sermon from this text. And make sure that it ends on Christ, and write it in the style of Spurgeon, and make it about this long, and it'll spit you something out. It won't necessarily be good, but it will be something that, by and large, makes sense.
Well,
it's scary stuff, Pastor.
So many guys get on there and just take something from somebody. Man, you lose your own voice. God called you uniquely because you're you, and intends to take His word and pour it through you. Man, don't deny yourself the beauty of being a servant of God to preach His word by taking somebody else's work. That's right. Listen. You can be your own Billy Graham. You can be your own whoever it is that you think's great.
So that you talking about a little bit, that reminds me that and you mentioned this in passing, but I thought it was fascinating when you're talking about how you had to speak on the history of preaching this past week. Did they record that? I would love to listen to it.
Yes, they did record it. They sure
Really?
did. They had a camera. I had a thingamajig on. Yeah, it was a great
I
class.
want to see that.
It was a great class. I went through there are 5 periods of preaching. I start off by saying, where does preaching come from? Well, it comes from, Jesus, or it comes from this, or it comes from that, or it comes from the other.
Prophets, right?
I go back to the prophets.
Yeah.
I go back to the 8th century prophets, 300 years before Aristotle, who in his book, Rhetoric, gave us the form for speech, logos, pathos, ethos.
Sure.
So that was the first book I had to read in PhD class. And I thought, I took it, and I went off to the mountains to read it, and I thought, this will be the day. I cannot make it through the PhD book if I've got to read this kind of stuff. So in literally my first semester, it was reading that kind of stuff, and it was just really, it was hard, it was difficult, it was hard to get through. But, the funny thing is this, is the longer if you'll study it and look at it, and it begins to fit pieces together.
Yes.
So, anyway.
So that's the first period. There's 4 other periods.
The first period is that it's called apostolic. It's Christ and the apostles, the preaching of Christ.
Oh, okay.
And I start with Jesus goes to his hometown, Nazareth.
Right.
He's handed a scroll, Isaiah.
This has been
he reads,
fulfilled in your midst.
There's the whole exposition right there.
Right.
He says, look here. Here's the fulfillment of it right here.
It's in Luke chapter 4, I believe. It's very good. And then,
yeah.
and then they kill him. They
tried to take him out and throw him off the cliff and stone him.
Do you cover Hebrews as an example of a sermon?
I do. I bring that out. If you want to look at the Old Testament, there are scholars that say Deuteronomy is a sermon from Moses.
Yeah, I could understand that.
And that Hebrews is a full, complete sermon. It's meant to be preached all the way through.
It makes sense that way.
So, and Dr. Allen says that. He says he thinks that is a sermon. So...
They in my preaching class that I'm just trying to finish up. The professor believes strongly.
That it's a sermon.
Example of a sermon. You should treat it that way. Read it that way. Look at the form that way.
Yeah.
The coolest thing about that is how, and you did some of this today in your message, because I'm listening with new ears, having studied more about preaching. The thing in Hebrews is that all of the illustration and application is biblical. Mm-hmm. So it's like, so I'm showing you this, and here's an illustration of it in the Old Testament. I'm showing you this. And so, and obviously that anytime you can use an inspired illustration, that's a good thing.
The thing is with people today, you use a biblical illustration, you have to go and explain it because they don't know it. They're not familiar with it. We live in such a time of such biblical illiteracy. When just at World War II, they sent that one little, from Dunkirk, they sent back one little statement to the War Department in England, in London, that said, hey, we're here, we're on the beach, waiting to be rescued, but if not. Those 3 words, but if not. Well, those were the 3 Hebrew children's words. We're not going to bow down to this God, and we expect God to save us. But if not, they can throw us in the fire. We're just not going to bow down. They were able to use 3 words, and everybody would understand what that was. But today you can talk about, David and Goliath, and you got to explain half the story.
You're exactly right. And that's why when people say things like, well, one of these days when we're a post-Christian society, and you're like, wake up, we're here.
Yeah, well, we're beyond that. We've blown past post-Christian.
I mean, even in the South, that's the problem. You talked about how you've been with Dean and Sarah. He wrote that amazing book, The Unsaved Christian. That really opened my eyes just to and as a preacher, you have to understand, that's the context you're preaching.
You're preaching to people like that every Sunday. Because my mom and dad went here and they did it, and I've got their Bible right here. It's on our coffee table, and we're down there. They were some of the first members at that church. We're in. Oh my! And we think like that because we have been so culturally baptized into believing that we are Christian.
Well, that's what religion is.
Yeah.
Because I have this pedigree or I've done this thing, I deserve X, Y, and Z. And that's why, strictly speaking, Christianity is a faith. It's a relationship. It's not so much like a religion, like these collection of rules that you must follow. No, all of that has already been fulfilled in Christ. And that's a good segue into what's happening there in Jeremiah chapter 10. Because you have these people that are worshiping idols that they made with their own hands, which is just absurd.
It really is.
And yet it's what's happening in our society.
Yeah, we do the same thing. You know, we don't make it, we'll go and buy it.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's
this is a good example.
It's
this is one of the things.
It's $150,000, you know, Porsche that we really have saved up, and we went and we got it, and we treat it better than we treat our children.
Oof.
You know, and we don't think that's not an idol.
That's exactly.
And we freak out over it, and you know that relationships, they can become idols in our life. Illicit relationships, ungodly, unbiblical relationships, lifestyle, sex. My gosh, sex is the biggest idol in America today. If you were from another planet and you came here, all you would think we were about is having the most bizarre sexual encounters. That's what all of life is about.
Yeah, that has definitely become an idol. The idea of like sexual exploration and release, and that's led to just you actually covered this a couple weeks ago, just talking about what that's led to with how the degradation of our society. But let's connect this back because now I'm making us run long. But I wanted you to be able to address the graduates again, like what they're walking into as they're going into college, because. And I think it's you that said this before. I can't pin down when it was. We talked about how it's been now multiple generations where just atheists have been completely controlling academia.
Yeah, higher education. States. Yes, they have. There's so many good things that are out there. I go all the way back to was it Bloom that wrote Opening the American Mind. I can't remember Bloom's book on that, but you can go back there. Chuck Swindoll wrote things on it. Nancy Pearson has written things on it. What it has captured now, higher education, is why we are living in the society that we're living in today.
It's amazing because we in the church, I guess in the bubble, like we have this understanding, well, of course Christ is real, of course Christ is all, this is what we're focused on, and we look what's happening in the world around us and we're like, well, that's just completely insane. Why would you believe that? And yet there are millions of people idolatrously and religiously devoted to this opposite way of thinking, this secular, atheistic, progressive, liberal, whatever you call it.
The whole transgender thing, men can have a cycle, which they cannot.
Right.
Men can have babies, they cannot. All this kind of stuff that now you've got medical science lining up behind it. You're thinking, these are the most educated people in our society. And you've got, academicians that are lining up behind it. And you're thinking, these are supposed to be, and yet they are teaching the next generation what is absolutely false.
But they're operating from a position of authority, and that's why you had to warn the graduates today to say, listen, the Bible is historically verifiable.
Absolutely.
It is a strong foundation to stand upon. So when your professor gets up in front of you and tells you that you can't trust it, here are just a few tips to help you win that conversation.
Why can't I trust it? Well, these are just copies. Well, we've got copies that go back almost to the time that the originals were written. We no longer can say we've got copies of copies of copies. We've got copies that go back almost to the time of the originals.
And that should fill us with encouragement. I mean, that's the thing. Like they'll base these arguments against the Word of God on these erroneous arguments, or they'll create a straw man, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, like you just said a minute ago, they're like, well, you don't want to believe in God, you got to trust the science. And you say, okay, what science? And they say, this science that says that men can be women and women can be men. You need to trust this. And you're like, but that's the same science we're supposed to trust that that says that everything just evolved?
Yeah. Listen, I stopped believing them when they said margarine was better for you than butter, and now they've switched on that.
That's the
I've
same.
always known butter was better for you than margarine.
That's the thing about and that they do that with eggs too. The incredible edible egg. No, don't eat the eggs.
Don't eat eggs. Now they come out, oh yeah, eggs, man, that's great.
They do the same thing with coffee. They're like, well, coffee's not that
It's
good
horrible.
for you. No, coffee cures cancer.
Yeah, it's great for you.
Why is it always the breakfast foods?
I don't
That's
know.
my question.
That's a good question.
It's the eggs.
Now
it's the
they're
coffee.
saying red meat's not bad for you. You can eat red meat. It really doesn't do all that harm to you.
Thank the Lord for
Yeah,
that.
because I kept eating it anyway.
You know who also says that red meat is good for you? God does. So maybe we should have just been reading Deuteronomy the whole time.
I'm telling you.
You know who says that you shouldn't eat bugs? Moses. It's in the Levitical law. Well, except for locusts, of course, which are very tasty. So they're trying to, anyway, I don't know. What are we even talking about anymore? Just, hey, be careful out there, graduates. That's what we're trying to tell you.
It's good.
You gotta get going.
Trust the word. Trust the power of God.
Anything else you want to say?
No.
All right, well then just say goodbye, Pastor.
Goodbye, Pastor.
See you guys.
Listen.